Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. This is Scott Piachetti, and just want to say thank you again for joining today's session. There was another great turnout for this, and so we're really excited to jump into today's session. So, without further ado, I will jump into and just start moving forward. So, our topic for today is just a continuation of that measurement and methodology series that we announced about 2 months ago. And as we stepped back and look at all of the webinars we've been doing over the last handful of years, we thought it'd be really great to just go back to the beginning, right? And last month we did a session on the basics of media measurement and really reviewed all of that. And again, appreciated everybody joining and all the great feedback from that session. And so now we're moving forward and really focusing on Geopath's methodology and really going to start digging deep into that over the next handful of sessions that we're going to do. And so today is really focused on an overview of Geopath's roadside methodology. And here with me today are Brian Shopper and AJ Chaffee, both with Geopath in the marketing department. We're working with me on all things education, training, as well as communication. So they'll join in and say hi in a little bit. But just specifically about our agenda today, some of the topics we're going to cover. So we want to really dig into and really help everybody understand how we look at and how we understand audience and what does that mean, because it is the part of the basis of how we get to our impression numbers. And then also how are we using mobile data and movement models to really understand how people are moving around the country, and then how does that all get kind of blended together to provide impressions to our members. And we'll talk about our visibility adjustment in that as well, because that's a key part of moving from, as you'll see, as we move from opportunity to see to likelihood to see, which is an important distinction when we talk about our measurement and out of home. Before I do jump in any further, I do want a couple housekeeping things. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A widget. We will try to answer as many questions as we can with the time we have. And also we'll try to answer them in the moment so that they're more relevant to what we're talking about at that time. Also, if you can refrain from putting your questions in the chat, just sometimes sometimes we may miss some of those questions if they are in the chat. So not a big deal if they do end up there, but if you can try to put them in the Q&A widget, that would be really helpful. And so I'm just going to jump into it and talk about kind of where we were with, as if to use this term, TAD, and kind of where we've evolved to as part of Geopath. And one of the key things, or a couple of the key things that helped us evolve to where we are today with our measurement is the availability of mobile data. And this is really key to helping us really scale our measurement and really get that precision to our measurement. So we're leveraging over 150 million mobile devices across the country. We're also leveraging opt-in background app data. Sometimes you may hear this referred to as SDK data, which is also a key aspect of helping us understand audience and movement. And then also connected car data. So when I say connected car data, think of your like OnStar systems, those kinds of things. And that's helping us understand people's decisions on the road, speed, that plays into our visibility adjustment as well. So all of this kind of all of this data we're able to leverage and really provide measurement for the industry. And one thing to really note when we're doing this, and I always want to make sure I point this out whenever I'm talking about this data, is it's important that we know it's aggregated and anonymized. So we don't know it's my phone or Brian's phone or AJ's phone. We know it's aggregated, anonymized data that we receive and we're able to look at. And we look at it at a census block group level. And we'll talk more about what that means as we kind of move through this session. But it is really important to know. And if you're ever asked about that, if you're presenting or talking to a member or a client, rather, it's important to point that out. Because again, we don't want to get into any issues with personal identifiable information. the benefits of having and being able to leverage this large scale mobile data allows us to, and again, I'm not going to necessarily talk about all of these points, and some of them we've already have experienced, if you've been using the Insight Suite or any of our data, and some of them are a little bit further down the line. But the idea of the ability to look at 8,000 different audience, it's definitely helped us to expand our audience profiling capabilities. Again, I've talked about this precision and scale for very granular local campaigns as well as national campaigns, and the ability to look at reporting by, again, this is maybe some of this is a little further down the line, but time of day, day of week, and also looking at seasonal variation of impressions. It's also allowed us to expand the media formats and the media environments that we look at and that we audit. So again, good example of that is our place-based inventory that we're now able to include. And as we look further down the line, being able to include like dynamic fleet, things like that. So it's expanding the ability for us to measure and look at different types of environments in terms of auditing the media there. Um, so this is a slide. Again, you may have seen this in the past, and I do like to show this slide because it really clearly helps to kind of differentiate kind of the kind of eyes on TAB, the older methodology from where we are today. And it's not that everything on the left side is not being used, it's an addition to. So as we look at the bottom, previously we leveraged circulation counts from Department of Transportation, and we had a pedestrian model. But as we look to what we're doing today, we're able to leverage this mobile data in addition to the traffic counts and really create a greater understanding of everybody's movement across the country simultaneously. And then in terms of our visibility adjustment, again, we leverage eye tracking studies, two different eye tracking studies that we had done several years ago. But again, leveraging that speed data from the connected car data allows us to really understand, as I was saying before, people's choices on the roads, their decisions, the speed, and it really helps us to understand where they're going in that movement around any given market. And those two things together are essentially an impression in out of home, right? So it's the circulation and then our visibility adjustment, which creates a likelihood to see metric for out of home. The other thing we're able to do, and has been at least one of the things I'm always really excited about when I present to members and to even clients, as members ask me to help them with some presentations, are the scale of the demographics available to us. Previously, we had around 400 to 600 different kind of demographics available in our old system. And now, if you've been in our Insight Suite, you see that there's approximately 8,000 different audiences available, plus or minus. And we're leveraging that data through Claritas, who also leverages data through GfK MRI, Scarborough, et cetera. And again, Brian will be talking about this in a little bit as well. And then allowing that mobile data has helped us to create a much more sensitive reach and frequency model that I know we put out some communications on and recently. So how does this all fit together? And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. And as I look at this slide here, a couple of things I want to point out. One of the key things that I think we often don't think about as a Geopath product is the auditing inventory, right? That is one of the key things we do, and it's the beginning of everything else we do. And this is going to be a future session that we're going to talk about in this series. We're going to actually show everybody how does a piece of inventory kind of move through and get audited, and what is the process that we go through. So we'll be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about some of these data sources in a little bit more detail, again, in future sessions. But just to know, I often like to just show this slide, talk about it as a high level so you can get a sense of kind of where each of the data sources fall into what their role is in helping us understand traffic counts and the speed data, as well as what our demographic sources and how does that all come together to provide our measurement. Brian, AJ, are there any questions? I thought I might have saw one come by.
Yeah, there were a couple little
sorry
ones that
about
came in, but nothing huge. We can kind of address them as we go through.
And sometimes, with the questions, Brian, AJ, or myself may respond directly and answer them for you in the moment. So, and so that brings us to the rest of the today and what we want to talk about. I wanted to level set and just have those other slides. And again, no, those are slides maybe some of you might have seen before if I was presenting to your organization directly or something like that. But one of the questions we get sometimes is like, well, how do you know? Like, how do you know, that X% of people have been to a Starbucks in the past 30 days that see my unit? And that's what we want to go through and talk about for the rest of the session today. I'm going to hand it off to Brian and let him jump in and start to talk about that.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so this slide right here, I just want to give sort of a really high level overview of what we're going to be talking about today and just kind of the high level overview of the methodology. And we're going to go into each of these 4 sections here in more detail in a minute. But again, at a very high level, we are able to leverage Claritas data and all of the data sets that they leverage to help us get really rich household level population profiles. And so that's what this first section here is. We have an understanding of people. Oh, you can actually go back. I'll just talk through the whole thing really quick. Or, I mean, we can jump into it. But basically, at the first level, we have this really good understanding of household population data. And that in turn informs our understanding of neighborhood populations. And then from there, moving on to the right, we understand all of those populations in the context of how they move throughout their markets. And again, we'll talk about all this in much more detail. So from there, like once we understand who the people are and how they move about their market, we can then understand how they interact with out-of-home media. So we're able to contextualize their movement and where they come from within the context of out-of-home media. And that's how we get to our audience understanding and target audience and things like that. And you can see in the next one, that's exactly what we do there. So we contextualize it within the context of where out-of-home inventory is. And then that's how we're able to do these kinds of calculations. And again, very high level, but now we can jump into each of these. So like I mentioned, we leverage Claritas's data to help us get an understanding of households and neighborhoods. And so if we look over on the left-hand side here, so Claritas's data set, like Scott mentioned, there's a lot of different things that they leverage. GFK MRI, Scarborough, the US Census, a ton of different things, as well as their own proprietary survey collections and things like that. But so we're able to leverage all of that data to give us these really rich audience profiles down at the household level. And that's just kind of, for a little bit more context, the way that Claritas sources their data is they're able to get these household profiles. So they're able to create these profiles of single households. And then from there, as you can see on the right-hand side, we use that understanding to help aggregate that up to the neighborhood level. So we're not really ever looking at individual households, or like Scott said, with the mobile data, we're never really looking at an individual unit. Almost everything that we're doing is looking at a neighborhood level or a census block group level. So all of these rich data sets and different profiles and things like that help us understand the profiles of the people who live in the households, and then in a larger sense, the profiles of the neighborhoods as a whole. And so if we go to the next slide.
Right. And I think that's an important note too. It's like, again, while Claritas's data is at the household level, we're looking at it more in the neighborhood. We're trying to understand census block groups, which again, for me, oftentimes I'll refer to it as it's kind of a neighborhood, because again, thinking about 400 to 600 kind of households in any given census block group.
So one of the major parts of this, like we were just talking about, with this aggregated anonymized data, we have the ability to, in addition to understanding the profiles of the neighborhoods, we are able to use the mobile data to understand home location by observing where nighttime and daytime location of devices is. So for example, like in a given week, the nighttime hours of where a device is generally what we use to figure out the home location. So we can see, between these hours of the night, every day of the week, this device is in this neighborhood. And then during the daytime of this week, or of every day this week, we can see that these kind of devices are all throughout the market, moving around. But we use that to understand the home location and the other locations essentially. And so from that, we're able to understand, like I said, not only where the home location of that device is, but also, what is the trip purpose? What are the different kinds of roadways that they're using to do that? And that's kind of getting a little bit ahead, but basically, with the combination of the demographic profiles of the neighborhoods, and then also this mobile device data and understanding where the home location and the other locations are, we get a better sense of where people begin their journeys and where their journeys take them. And so we can move into the next slide. Oh, and again, home locations, like we were talking about, the home locations are aggregated up to the census block group level. Again, kind of what we've been calling a neighborhood, but roughly about 1,000 households, I believe, right? Is that?
So, um, y-
It fluctuates.
about 1,000
About
people-ish,
1,000 people,
say,
my mistakes.
400 to 600 households. Again, it's roughly, it's a rough approximation. And one thing too, I think the second bullet here on this page is also important, and I know you explained it, but you may also get a question at times like, well, what if I've moved and my cell phone has a different area code than where I am? And again, that's why it's important to realize it's really not about that. It's about understanding where those devices are at any given time and really understanding that versus the actual, kind of phone numbers. Because I've been asked that more than once. So I wanted to make sure I just kind of say that out loud for people. But I know there's some questions coming in. Some of them, well, we definitely can at the end. Some of them will summarize near the end if we don't get to them all.
So I just we kind of wanted to use this slide to basically re-summarize this whole section. So again, we can use Claritas's data set and all of the different demographic data and things like that within their data set. So we utilize all of that data to give us these really rich profiles of the population at the household level, which we then look at instead at the neighborhood level. So we aggregate that up to neighborhood profiles. And so again, with the mobile location data as well, we're able to also use that to understand home location and other locations. So in part, that's when we're talking about like target audience, target in market, a lot of that comes from right there, that piece. So anytime we see in market population, that's how we're able to understand that.
Right. Okay, cool.
So now moving into the next section about the movement around the country, we are able to utilize traffic counts to help us get a better understanding of overall circulation. So traffic counts are kind of the basic, like you can see here, the basic building block that we use to get to circulation. And so we do that through a partner in a product called Streetlytics. And basically what that allows us to do is it allows us to have a full movement model for the whole US for every directional road segment for every hour. And so we're able to understand, the flows of people throughout markets across different roadways, the different kind of congestions throughout the different times and dates of the week, and just kind of a lot of different things about, at this time of day in this road type or on this road, we're able to get a really good understanding of how many people are moving. And that's also, like you can see here, that's also cross-referenced with the mobile trip data. So in addition to all of that, the movement data that's through Streetlytics and the nationwide movement, we also just have a better understanding of, because we know the home locations and the neighborhoods and all that, we're able to contextualize those two together and to see people from these neighborhoods generally use these kind of roads to commute to work, and they take these other roads on the way back home because traffic is different. So we can have a really rich understanding of how people move throughout their markets across the whole US.
Mhm.
And so this is just kind of explaining basically that same thing. Like we have an understanding of home location and other locations. And so we're able to look at how people, like we understand their home location and also trip purpose. So we can use that to contextualize how they move throughout the market, because we know that people are moving through these different roadways in certain ways. And so we can combine that with our understanding of how and where people move. And so all of that gives us a really rich understanding of the different ways that people can move throughout their markets.
And, Brian, just to jump in to try to address a couple of the questions that have come up. So one was, do we have this level of data for every DMA across the country? And yes, we have enough data that allows us to understand, each market and at a very granular level. And the kind of with that was like, what percent of mobile data is being counted in each market, and don't necessarily know kind of exact number for that, but basically we don't look at every single phone, and we don't need to, right? What we do is we understand enough of the devices in a market to really help us understand and extrapolate out to the rest of the market. And oftentimes I talk about it like a Sudoku puzzle, right? We know enough pieces of information to fill in the rest and really understand. For example, if you may be your phone needs to be able and ready to make a call at any given moment, right? So it's constantly pinging towers, and we know it pings the tower here, and then a few minutes down the road, and then you maybe took a left turn, and it pings it again. And so there's only so many ways you could have made that trip path in that amount of time going that speed. So we're able to kind of fill in the puzzles, so to speak, in that way. And then there was also another question about kind of Apple and how their mobile tracking. And it's definitely something that is on our radar. We are aware of it. And it hasn't impacted our panel of kind of one of the sources up there on one of the slides earlier was our mobile geolocation partners, and it definitely has not impacted our ability to do what we're doing, but we are aware of it and we're continually monitoring it. And again, a similar question about cookies and enhanced security. And again, we definitely know this is a concern and something we are aware of, and we're continually monitoring. But as of yet, we haven't really seen it impact. And even if we have at times, when some of these announcements come out, we may at times see a little dip, but it ultimately goes back to where it was in the past. So anyway, I'm going to kick it back to Brian and let him.
Yeah, can you, next slide, please?
Yeah. We'll come back to other questions in a moment.
So depending on, and I actually think I just saw a question about this, but depending on the type of market or even the area within a certain market, it's possible that pedestrian foot traffic makes up a majority of the audience in a given area. Certain cities, if they have a lot of public transit and a lot of pedestrian foot traffic, that might be a larger portion of the audience circulation than vehicle traffic. And so that's where a lot of that mobile SDK data comes in. So all of the, as Scott mentioned at the beginning, all of the opt-in app location, things like that. So that kind of data we're able to leverage to help us understand more granular movement. So we can see it at like a block by block level and just understand how pedestrians also move throughout their markets. And then basically, just to summarize all of this different movement data. So the movement model itself of the roadways, the pedestrian understanding, the understanding of home location, all of this together helps us understand what different roadways people will take and how they're using different forms of transport, what their purpose is, what their destination is. So there's a lot of things that we can infer and understand from all of this. And basically, just kind of looking back now at these two together, these are really happening simultaneously with each other. We have this understanding of the household level population data, and again, aggregated up to the neighborhood level. And so at the same time as we are able to create these household profiles and these neighborhood profiles, we also have this really rich understanding of movement throughout a market. And so the combination of these two helps us understand who the people are that are moving and how they're moving. Yeah, and
great. I'll hop in and talk about the next section, I guess, about connecting trip paths to out-of-home media. And I'll just take it from the next slide, please. Yeah, so as previously mentioned in the segments Brian discussed, the household and mobile data we leverage allows us to create rich population activity models showing how populations move during their days and the demographic and psychographic profiles they fit. Now, by understanding who these audiences are and the unique roadway and pedestrian segments they travel on, we're able to create a living network to understand the audiences traveling these routes. With this understanding of both the audience and the ways they move throughout the market, we're then able to contextualize this information alongside out-of-home inventory to quantify audience metrics for the units along these routes. To connect these audiences to the out-of-home locations to quantify impression data, the Geopath team uses latitude and longitude locations of the inventory to show proximity to specific roadway and pedestrian traffic patterns. These aspects are foundations in our methodology and help us understand those with the opportunity to see these advertisements based upon our knowledge of who are traveling the roads and the out-of-home units they come into contact with. Next slide, please. However, to provide the likelihood to see measures that Geopath produces, many more factors come into play. Now that the inventory is layered in within the population activity model and specific segments for travel, we can now begin to understand how the audiences move on these segments and how they interact with out-of-home structures. Factors such as how large the media is within the audience's field of view, where the media is within the audience's field of view, such as right, left, or center read, or how much time the audience has to see the media, all play a role in generating these likelihood to see measures. They're just a couple parts of a major component in Geopath's auditing of impression data, the visibility adjustment, also referred to as the VAI.
And this is something we'll delve deeper into in subsequent sessions within this series. I know this is often something that we do get a lot of questions about, and really, yes, this is kind of just a high level kind of understanding of some of the factors that go into this adjustment. And I think there was a question I noticed earlier on asking about, like, does speed play a role in this and how long somebody is within that view shed? And the answer is yes. So it is, what we talk about it as often as the dwell time, and I think that's even kind of in AJ's next slide here.
Yeah, so, key points such as dwell time and speed data for roadway segments, proximity to the roadway, degrees of rotation, facing, illumination, field of view, and size all contribute to our visibility adjustment. Detailed road network information such as these data and inventory attributes enable Geopath to provide precise visibility calculations unique to each out-of-home unit and each roadway and pedestrian segment. There are many more factors that we could discuss today about the visibility adjustment, but as Scott mentioned, we will be having a session to go over in much more detail on the visibility adjustment and VAI, but we'll make sure to send out an announcement following whenever that's finalized.
Right. And just to hold here for a moment too, and I think there was another question about, is it possible that, two units on the same road segment may have different impressions? And the answer is yes. And again, given the visibility adjustment and showing you all like how we audit a piece of inventory are going to be key factors in helping understand why. But, just to know like subtleties of just the difference in size of a particular unit, the angle to the road, the distance from the road, those all play a factor in the ultimate impressions of any given unit. And again, in addition to the speed and the dwell time in any given area. So yes, that can happen. And these are all different factors that we'll dig deeper into over time with everybody to help you make sure you understand and have a good sense of what impacts, impressions.
Yeah, well, going back to the overall steps in our methodology, now that we have been able to identify the household population data and area of residence, show how these populations travel, and connected them to trip paths, and in turn the out-of-home media that they come in proximity with, we can now finally calculate target audience data for the over 8,000 different audiences in Geopath Insights. With the combination of all these data from varying sources listed in the previous steps of our methodology, such as demographics, movement, location, proximity, and more, Geopath can now determine specific audience metrics for each out-of-home unit. These metrics include impressions, composition, reach, and frequency, just to name a few for each of the target audiences exposed to the media. Other key metrics available in GeoPath Insights are 0+ total audience data, target audience composition, TRPs, in-market versus out-of-market metrics, reach and frequency, ReachNet. That's just to name a few. I'm sure those of you familiar with working in GeoPath Insights have used other custom combinations of audiences as well. And with that said, that is the final step in our process of connecting household level population data to calculating target audience delivery. I think now would probably be a great time to ask if anyone has any questions.
Sure. And just to reiterate, and again, like one of the big things for me is like, I'm always trying to like, so how do I summarize it in a hopefully nice, understandable way for everyone? And, you know, the way I look at it is like, we need to understand the people, who they are. We need to understand where they're going. And then the third column, where their trips are taking them by any given piece of inventory. And then we are able to then add and contextualize with the metrics that we provide. And so that's ultimately kind of the process and kind of the ingredients that go into what we're doing. And again, just want to pause, and I know there's some questions coming in. And Brian, are there any particular questions that we want to talk about? I see one here asking about the ratings of what our forecast is, and basically what we produce is an annual forecast, and we issued this year our forecast in January, and it typically is an annual forecast that goes from January through that entire year. We are, and we've noted in some of our communication that's gone out, because of the uniqueness of this year and where we were when we had to predict the, create the predictive model, the forecast. We wanted to look at this. We're monitoring this monthly, and you can see some of that even as you look at the impression variation dashboard. That's some of the kind of data that goes into our analysis and understanding kind of how is the observed data tracking against what we predicted. And we will likely be producing a mid-year forecast this year to really address that and to allow us all to, to have that mid-year 12-month forecast. And again, more communication on that will be coming out shortly, even maybe today, explaining that and what we're thinking and what we're talking about. So that is something, appreciate the question, and it is something we are looking to address. And then again, a question on what do we use to actually view billboards to evaluate the inventory? And there's a bunch of different information that we're looking at. We're using, Google Maps to understand that. We're using the information that our members send in terms of their photo sheets. That's also helpful in helping us understand kind of where any given unit is, as well as the media data sheets that are completed by our members that helps us understand illumination, size, etc. So the latitude and longitude, all of that goes into helping us understand and audit any given unit. And again, we'll talk more about that in the future. Let's see. So a couple of questions about the audiences coming in. Yes, we will be providing the additional behavioral audiences for the 2021 data. I actually was just, don't have an exact date for that just yet, but we'll be able to communicate that out when I do have one. And in terms of this session and where it will be available, yes, we'll have this session available for everyone, and it'll be on our YouTube channel, also be in the Geek Out tab of our website as well. And just wanted to check in. I'm trying to track all the questions. Brian, AJ, are there any other questions that have come up that we need to answer?
Yeah, there was one that came in through the chat function, actually. I was just asking, is it possible for 2 units side by side to have the exact same delivery, like one that's a left-hand read and one that's a right-hand read? I would say most likely not. I guess it could be possible, but there are so many different factors on potentially one side of the road or the other, and also just degrees of rotation could make a huge difference. So I suppose it is possible, but I think it's pretty unlikely.
Right. Yeah, I mean, again, and that goes into some of what I was saying earlier, like all of those factors that go into kind of the auditing process. And I think once we have that session, hopefully that will become clearer. We can actually, in that session, I think even show you live how we audit and the tool that we use to do that. And I think a couple of the questions about the kind of auditing when our forecast is coming out and are we going to be producing uh, more frequent forecasts. That ultimately, that is the long-term goal for Geopath, to provide the industry with more frequent forecasts, and that is kind of the long-term goal and something we're working towards. I think that was part of the promise of all this data allows us that ability, and so that is where we are working towards through our our committees and our board of directors, really trying to understand what's the right pace of rolling that out. And COVID provided an opportunity for us to actually start down that path, because again, given where we were when we were having to create that initial forecast to where we are today, vaccination rates have skyrocketed, and things are really moving more quickly than we probably had line of sight into at that time. So this provides a great opportunity for us as an industry to produce a mid-year forecast. And we'll likely kind of start to kind of create that cadence of multiple forecasts in a year moving forward. And if and when we do put out that mid-year forecast, it'll be a 12-month forecast. So I just saw that question come in. So it would be from June, it'd be 12 months out from that period. So we'd continually have an annual forecast, but it would just be crossing years this year. And again, there's a lot around that. So we wouldn't just put that out. There'd be a lot. We want to communicate that and educate everybody on that. And what does that really mean in terms of the tool, and how do we use it as an industry? So I know I just said that, but I do want to just caution that we wouldn't just put that mid-year forecast out with no explanation. There would be a lot of communication and education and webinars to go along with that as well. Cool. And anyway, Brian, AJ, are there any, again, I'm trying to track through some of the questions to make sure we're addressing. Is there anything in particular that came up that that we can answer or have not answered yet?
Just trying to read through some of these other ones. There's a bunch that just came in. Yeah, just a lot of questions about the forecast itself, which I think the communications will help clear up as well. But
Okay. Great. So I think, again, I do think it seems like there are a number of questions around the potential for the mid-year forecast. And again, that's not necessarily a topic I wanted to dive into too much right now. Today, there will be more communication coming out around that very, very soon. And again, like I said, something we would make sure we're educating our clients, our clients and our members, and helping them understand what are the implications of that.
One just came in that I thought was worth addressing really quick out loud. It was a question about the 2021 data versus 2020, and certain comparisons between the two. And I just want to make mention, there are certain things within the two data sets, specifically the reach and frequency modeling within there. There have been changes between 2020 and 2021, so comparing them together is not really like an apples to apples comparison. It's basically like an apples to oranges comparison, looking at 2021 data versus 2020. So it's hard to say for that, but basically I would suggest not trying to compare them number to number, because there's a significant
Well,
difference, or not significant, there's a difference in the overall methodology for reach and frequency that has impacted the numbers from
And-
last year to this year.
And also, and again, we're going to be announcing another, just to talk about reach and frequency for a moment, we're going to be announcing, again, I think later this afternoon, another webinar helping our members understand the reach and frequency. I know we did one about a month back, and we're going to do another one in the next couple of weeks as well. But also, just to piggyback on the 2020 versus 2021, the 2021 forecast was created pre-COVID, right? Because we had no idea that COVID was coming when we created that forecast. So the 2021 forecast does account for that. And again, we again did a session or two early on in the year about that, and really helping everybody, hopefully helping understand what went into creating that forecast. But again, that forecast, the 2021 forecast, does account for the impact we're seeing of COVID and the anticipated recovery. So even you shouldn't really, it's not really, like Brian said, an apples to apples comparison to compare 2020 to 2021, just in terms of kind of even just the COVID aspect to it as well. So I think I want to just kind of jump over to kind of some of these other slides while we still have time. And again, if we didn't get to answer everybody's question, we will follow up. We'll try to follow up via email, and just get a chance to just take a look at them and consider them, and give email an answer to people if you didn't get your question answered here in this session. Do you want to talk about kind of the next session? So the next session, we'll send out again an invite for this from Wednesday, May 19th at 2 p.m. And so this is kind of the next level down, and it will address some of these factors that even some of the questions that were asked today in terms of, like, what impacts my impressions. So really digging deep into, like, things such as kind of vehicular and pedestrian traffic, what does home location mean, and our understanding of home location and how that's kind of changed over time. Illumination, how do we handle that now previously to what we've done in the past, and why do these things matter, and what impact do they have ultimately on impressions. And so just continuing along with this series of sessions that we've been doing. So as I kind of mentioned a couple of times in this session, I think today, we will be talking about kind of our data sources. I want to show about how we audit inventory, and then also go a little bit deeper on the VAI as well. So if you want to catch up on any past sessions, you can always go to this is a screenshot of our website. Go to geopath.org and go over to Geek Out and just scroll down to the out of home office hours section. The 6 most recent sessions are always there. You can always just click where it says click here to go to our YouTube. It brings you directly to our YouTube channel, and you could see all of the past out of home office hour videos as well that are available there. And if you have any other questions, again, like I said, we'll be reaching out to people if we didn't get to your question today. But if you do have any other questions, that come to mind after the session, please reach out to us at geekout@geopath.org. And again, if you need any other help, if you need help, with us pulling data for you, or if you need help logging in, reset your account, this is a great source for you to reach out to us, and we can help you out. And hopefully get your answers to you quickly. So again, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate everybody joining and all the questions. Hopefully we've helped answer more questions than we've caused. But again, I always make sure we're available for everybody to answer any additional questions. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.